If you are pregnant or you've recently had a baby, this podcast is for you. I am your host, Kath Bequee, a physiotherapist working in women's health and mum of 3. Join me each week as we dive into all things pregnancy care, childbirth and postnatal recovery, helping you have a wonderful pregnancy and afterbirth experience. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Well, hi there and welcome back to another episode of the Fitness Mama podcast. I am your host, Kath Bequee. I'm a mum of 3 young girls, a physiotherapist for women with 15 years experience, and I have an online community, Fitness Mama, which helps to provide pregnant and new mums with the exercises, support and resources they need to move from the overwhelm, the physical aches and pains of pregnancy, the weakness felt after birth, and instead we replace that with the comfort and confidence to get their bodies and minds strong again so that they can get back to doing what they love, whether or not that's running around with the kids at the park or running the next marathon. So in today's episode, I have the pleasure of chatting to the lovely Josie Smyth, who is a Melbourne mum of 2. And Josie experienced something that historically isn't talked about and discussed much. Josie has experienced postnatal depression twice and since recovery founded Smiling After PND. Since 2015, Josie raises awareness, educates the community and helps to break the shame and stigma and encourages people to seek help. Josie does this through a few different avenues, including a private peer support group, which has been taken online since COVID, self-care events, public speaking, and a tea line designed to evoke conversations around mental health over a cuppa. In her spare time, Josie volunteers with Perinatal Anxiety and Depression Australia as a community educator. So I do want to add a trigger warning as this episode does discuss postnatal depression, because if this brings up anything for you, please don't hesitate to contact Panda or chat to your trusted healthcare professional. In this episode, Josie and I discuss the signs and symptoms of postnatal depression, how to seek treatment, and we also discuss what people can do to help support someone they know that might be experiencing issues of postnatal depression. We have a chat about perhaps what might not be so helpful for someone in this situation, and Josie speaks honestly and openly about her experience. This episode is a must-listen to anyone who is pregnant or recently had a baby, but it's also a must-listen for anyone who knows someone who is pregnant or recently had a baby. So I do hope you enjoy it. But before we dive in, there is something super exciting that is happening in the next few weeks. 5 days of 5 ways to prepare for labour is a free 5-day event starting on Monday, the 30th of November, 2020. These 5 days will leave you feeling more confident and empowered about your upcoming childbirth experience. In these 5 days, you will learn about active birthing positions. What are some positions that you can use during labour? You'll learn about perineal massage, what perineal massage is, how it can be used to help reduce the risk of perineal tears and episiotomy, and also how to do it. You're going to learn about the TENS machine, which can be used for pain relief, as well as pelvic floor essentials to help with your pregnancy, birth, and afterbirth recovery. So as a women's health physiotherapist, everything I will be sharing in this free 5-day event are things that I believe every woman deserves to know when pregnant, to really help with her childbirth and afterbirth experience. To register for this free event before doors close, head to fitnessmama.com/challenge. The link is also in the show notes. All right, let's get into this episode. Josie, thank you so much for joining me today. I know we have connected so much on social media, but it's also so nice to be able to talk to you face to face. Well, this is pretty much the real deal these days, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Through COVID-19, I've learned that you can actually reach people far and wide through the online community that you normally wouldn't.
Absolutely. And it is just so generous of you today to share your story, because I know this is a topic so close to your heart, and I do feel honoured to be able to talk to you about something so intimate and about a topic that traditionally has not been discussed. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a delight.
So to get started, could you please let us know a little bit about you and let us know what is Smiling After PND?
Sure. I'm a Melbourne mum of two, Leo, who's 5, and Lily is now 2. And I experienced postnatal depression with both of them. And then since recovering, decided to write a blog because I found that there was a gap of people who had experienced postnatal depression and hearing their stories. And so I decided to write down my experience, and that's how Smiling After PND was born. And it's sort of grown as the kids have grown and doing a few courses and realizing, yes, there is a gap and it is needed, as you say, because it's really common. And so now Smiling After PND is essentially a way of breaking shame and stigma, raising awareness about postnatal depression through my story. And we've got a peer group. I tried to do it in the community, but then COVID hit, so it's online, and we've got about 66 members. And it's just such a great community where we share experiences, validate one another. And it's different to what you would experience with a mental health professional. I feel like there's a different level of compassion and empathy because when you've been through it, you can go into that other person's shoes and know what it actually feels like to have those thoughts and feelings.
Is your Facebook group something that anyone can be a member of?
So it's Smiling After PND Mums Group, and you can find it there. And there's just a few questions that I ask prior to, a little bit of screening that goes on. And it's basically a group that is welcoming and anyone can attend, but as I say, it's a mums group specific.
Okay, so we'll have all those links in the show notes. So let's get started. What would the signs and symptoms of PND be?
It's interesting that you say that because I find in the beginning it mimics the baby blues, and out in the community, the baby blues is widely talked about. That's something that doesn't carry that shame and stigma as postnatal depression. So, you get teary, you're flat, you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, your sleep's disturbed. But with the baby blues, that tends to dissipate after a week or so. With postnatal depression, it's lingering. They don't go away on their own. But people also mention that they're angry and irritable, which I felt. Loss of appetite. I guess you start to isolate yourself. And at the later stages, so when it is untreated, the trouble with bonding with your baby, thoughts of self-harm, and that's when you need urgent assistance from a medical health professional. It's different because it affects your daily functioning, it affects your capacity to parent, and as I say, it's lingering.
And at what stage did you know you needed a bit of help?
I think it was when it was mentioned to me by a loved one. So it was my mum, hubby, my in-laws, my sisters, my sister-in-law. It wasn't just one person saying it. It was a few. I thought it was actually an ordinary part of parenting. I didn't know about postnatal depression with Leo. I knew about it with Lily, and I'll explain how that was different. But with Leo, I'd never heard of postnatal depression before. So I thought, this is just the baby blues. But hang on, it's hanging around a little bit longer, and this can't be right because I'm feeling it all day, every day. And so I think it was when family noticed what had happened is then my behaviour started to change. So I was getting angry and irritable. My sleeping was impacted. I really wasn't eating. I was disconnected and just wasn't answering the phone, refused to go out of the house. And so that's when family said, Josie, we're really worried about you. We've noticed this. Have you thought about speaking to a GP? I'm sure there's help available. And that's when they put the 2 and 2 together and went off to the GP, and everything changed for the better after that appointment.
Oh, that's good. And what stage after birth was that?
I sought treatment 4 months after the birth, and apparently that's really common. This is the issue, I think, because the longer you seek treatment, the longer, you're in those yucky feelings and the harder it is to recover. Research has shown that earlier you get treatment, the quicker recovery, and you can get back on with your life. And I think the delay is around shame and stigma, definitely, and this whole society's perception of what a mother should be.
And did you ever feel resistance or denial that this is happening to you?
Absolutely. In the beginning, I thought, tomorrow it'll be better. Surely not me. I'm so robust. I didn't realize at the time that I'd actually been living with anxiety most of my life. But I kept thinking, I don't have a mental illness. But in fact, I was experiencing a mental health condition. So shock more than anything else, and denial definitely. Because of those thoughts, would that make me a bad mother if I'm depressed? Not realizing, in fact, it's got nothing to do with my parenting skills, nothing to do with me as a woman or mother. It's just something that happened to me.
That's really interesting that you say it's only in hindsight that you realise you had issues with anxiety most of your adult life. That's really interesting that took this to happen to you to realise that.
I think we're getting better at talking about mental illness in the community. Anxiety, I think it's more manageable. You can mask it a bit more, and anxieties can actually be a positive. It can help you to achieve your goals and keep you going. But too much of it is when it becomes unsustainable and can start impacting on your life.
And do you know the stats around how many have postnatal depression versus how many might have postnatal anxiety?
The umbrella term is perinatal anxiety and depression, and that encapsulates conception till 12 months. And in the perinatal period, up to 1 in 6 mums experience perinatal anxiety and depression, and 1 in 10 dads experience perinatal anxiety and depression. So with postnatal depression, it's 1 in 5. So it's more common than postnatal anxiety. And that's the thing I don't think people realise, that you can actually experience a mental health condition in pregnancy. And if you can access the treatment then your chances of experiencing afterbirth are lessened because you've got help from a medical health professional.
So you mentioned when you first went to the GP at 4 months after birth, that changed everything. So what sort of treatment did you access?
So at that first appointment, I filled out an Edinburgh postnatal depression questionnaire. So they're just a series of questions about how I've been feeling over the last few weeks. And that came back high for postnatal depression. And I do urge people to please answer that questionnaire honestly, because it gives the GP or whoever, because I know they also hand that out at maternal child health nurse appointments, it gives them an idea of where you're at. The GP then filled out a mental health care plan. And at that point, I was able to access 10 sessions with a psychologist, rebated by Medicare. I think now in COVID, they've bumped that up to 20 and through telehealth. So that's absolutely brilliant. And also a psychiatrist, because I hadn't been on medication before for a mental illness. It was advised that I do seek professional treatment from a psychiatrist to see what medication works. And there are some symptoms when you do start it, and it's advised to be monitored. Once I started seeing the psychologist and the psychiatrist and the medication started working, I can't tell you exactly the day it happened, but I look back and felt the fog lift. You know, I could see the colours and I could see Leo. There was this blockage between he and I that I didn't know what that was, and I knew that that was the fog. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because it is an illness that is treatable and recovery is possible. And so that's why I'm so hopeful about not just myself, but other people in the community.
This episode is brought to you by Baby Bee, Australian-owned and designed prams combining quality, safety and style. Not only does Baby Bee let you try their prams at home with free returns for 9 months, yes, that's 9 months, they also offer an industry-leading 3-year warranty for total peace of mind. With thousands of 5-star reviews, around-the-clock customer care, and up to $300 of free accessories with every pram, what are you waiting for? Go visit www.babybeeonline.com and check them out for yourself. And yes, for listeners of the podcast, there is a 20% discount code. Enter FITBEE, FITBEE 20 at checkout, and T's and C's apply. Yeah, and it's just so amazing what you're doing in terms of bringing awareness to it, and all this discussion really does help to break down that stigma.
I think if I wasn't a mother and just having a mental health condition, I think I would be looked at differently, and that's what I want to break through. That's why this podcast is just so important. people talking about it because it's okay. It's okay to not be okay.
Absolutely. So at what stage did you start to write this blog of yours? Like how long after having been diagnosed and having treatment did you then decide to start writing the blog?
It coincided actually with when I started volunteering with Panda. So after about 12 months, I felt ready and recovered enough to want to give back to the community. So I contacted Panda and explained that I would read their stories, their recovery stories, and that helped me through what I was going through, and wondered if there was capacity for me to volunteer, which I started and still am nearly 5 years later. Through that, we do community education, and in doing so, you've got to share your story. I'd never actually seen it written before, and we did that in one of our training sessions. And I loved the story so much that that's when I decided to start Smiling After PND with that story. So the blog started in 2015, and that's when I started volunteering.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did you find most helpful from your support network, and what did you perhaps find not so helpful?
The thing that stuck out to me the most, and still does now because I still have mental health challenges, is the check-ins. Even just a text to say, thinking about you, love you. When I tell them I want to thank you for reaching out, and they say, but I didn't do anything. I just sent a text, not realizing how supportive that is because you're saying to that person you are loved. So just a simple check-in, and then the people coming over and sitting with me, they would validate what I was thinking first and foremost, and thank you for sharing, and gosh, that sounds really tough. You know, what can we do to help? Those sorts of conversations were really, really helpful. Dropping off meals, watching the kids so that I could go to my mental health professional appointments was really, really helpful. Yeah, and just being with, because it is really hard to be with someone when they change and they're not themselves. So to be able to just sit with them is so powerful and so, so helpful.
And what you've just said there, it's good to hear because it's nothing major and it's quite easy to action simple things as well. So thank you. So what isn't helpful?
Definitely dismissing and saying you're just having a bad day. You know, saying derogatory things are definitely unhelpful. And the opposite to the text is the no text, or even not talking about it. You know, some people said, I didn't really want to say anything because I didn't want to tip you over the edge. But speaking about it is so much more helpful than pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. The avoidance is really not helpful at all.
It's good to hear that because I think sometimes when people might be avoiding sending a message, it's not they don't want to help, it's just that they don't know how to help. And so silence is the easier option. So to hear that all it takes is, are you okay? Or how are you? Thinking of you, that's great to hear.
It's sitting in that uncomfortable. And uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean bad. It's okay to be uncomfortable. You're coming from a place of good. And that's something to remember.
You've mentioned a little bit about Panda and how that was a great help for you. For anyone listening that hasn't heard of Panda, what is it and how might it be helpful?
Sure. So PANDA stands for Perinatal Anxiety and Depression Australia. It's Australia's only national helpline for people experiencing perinatal mental health conditions. Now, you don't need a diagnosis. So you could be thinking, oh, I am experiencing this symptom. It could be absolutely okay to ring. And basically, once you call, you go through a bit of a triage because they want to see exactly where you are at. And then they stay with you throughout your journey. It's not just this one phone call. They stay with you and check in. So it's a counselling service. And then they also have a website which is full of information about what the signs and symptoms are. They've also got a checklist that you can fill out. And I thought that was really handy because you could do that in the safety of your own home and then use that as a tool to talk to either your GP or your maternal child health nurse or an obstetrician. And then they also have what I do is the volunteer work, so the community education, trying to educate the community about perinatal mental illnesses. So it's a fantastic organisation and I'm so proud to be a volunteer, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you say it's similar to Beyond Blue, but it's focused on the perinatal stage?
Yes, it's specialised.
Yeah.
So it's perinatal mental. And men and women can call. And also carers can call. You know, a partner who's concerned about their loved one can call. Also maternal child health nurses can call on behalf of someone. So that's also great as well.
Amazing. So when you started a blog and you started getting your story out there, do you mind sharing a little bit about what you experienced in terms of, I don't like to use the word shame, but did you experience any stigma when you started to get your story out?
No, thankfully. I think a lot of the shame and stigma comes from within ourselves. And so we perpetuate the shame and stigma. But I think it's that higher level of what a mother should be, as I say, you know, this happy-go-lucky, pushing a pram down the street with a smile on her face, fresh-faced, well, slant. When we know how challenging parenthood can be, from, you know, breastfeeding issues to colicky baby. So that's just another added layer. But I think we have these expectations of being a perfect parent, which I think that's something I succumbed to, that I had to get it right. If they weren't sleeping or they weren't feeding at the times that I thought, there's something wrong with me or there's something wrong with them. It's that idea of perfection, and we know that it doesn't exist. And good enough parenting, it's just good enough, you know. So it's lowering those expectations. But this was only through accessing mental health treatment and challenging those negative thoughts. I wouldn't have been able to think that at the time. All I thought was, I'm a rubbish mum.
It's really interesting how we do place those expectations on ourselves, and it's hard to know where it comes from. Like, I remember with my first thinking, if I just can have a shower and brush my hair, it's a good day. Whereas by the time it came to my second and third, I often didn't have a shower and I often didn't brush my hair straight away. So those internal expectations changed, but I don't know why I thought for my first baby I needed to have a shower every morning and brush my hair and then I was set to go.
I think as well, in mothers groups or in our friendship groups, is it spoken about? Are the challenges of parenting spoken about? And when you do meet up, you do have to have been showered and you've got to put on this facade that everything's okay. So that's where I think we do put it on ourselves. Whereas if we spoke more about the challenges, saying, you know, I'm finding this really hard, you let down your guard.
And I think social media in some ways has helped. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, but I find like Instagram, for example, wasn't around, was it? Around 6 to 8 years ago. I didn't have it. But I feel like I do follow a lot of people who are being quite honest and open on Instagram. So you do hear all the bad stories, but you also get some really lovely, honest accounts on Instagram. And I feel if you're able to access information, there is a lot of real talk, which is great, that perhaps wasn't around a few years ago.
Exactly. I think you're right. I think social media is two-pronged because there is the glossy and the pretty and the all done up. And that's fine. But it's also nice to see the other side, because I think that's unsustainable. My kids are dressed by 9 and then by 10 they're all dirty with mud and, you know, and I'm not dressed. I had a shower, I think it was at 1 o'clock the other day. So you're right. I think social media is changing, but I don't think it was always like that. And I think COVID's helped definitely bring out discussions around mental health, because isolation has impacted all of us. We've had a lot taken away. I'm missing, you know, socializing with my family and my friends and hugging people. And I've had 2 bouts of mental health issues in this period, and I know others have too, but it's great to be able to talk about it.
Absolutely. And I think during this stage as well, it's even harder for pregnant and new mums to be able to access the support that they might need. But having said that, there's also some amazing online resources now.
So I'm hearing a lot of grief from mothers. So they haven't had the grandparents to come over and hold their baby and haven't been able to have the baby shower. It's more difficult accessing support because you cannot, under no circumstances, raise a baby on your own. You need the village, whether it's a neighbour or your mum or a community member, a council officer that can come and help. You need the support. I just don't think you can do it on your own, and COVID's thrown a spanner in the works. But at the same time, I've heard a lot of mums saying that in the hospital, because they haven't had to shower and put on that facade, they've actually enjoyed the rest and felt bonded to babies and, just having that time to get to know that little one. So there's been some pros and some cons.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a physical side of things, where I come from it, I know that I've heard from a few women saying how they felt that they could rest more in that early few weeks after childbirth. They've been able to lie down and not have to worry about vacuuming because a visitor's about to come over. And as a result, they've been able to have that more horizontal rest and take their pelvic floor off stretch and help with that pelvic floor recovery and, the recovery of everything after birth. So that has been a little positive out of this whole experience too.
And surely it's linked. Physical health is linked to your mental health. So if you are able to get that rest and recovery, it impacts on your mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've had this conversation before about the direct correlation between physical health and mental health.
Have you found in your industry any change with mental health, people speaking more openly about it, or is it still sort of hidden in your industry?
Well, all the Fitness Mama members, so anyone inside the Fitness Mama membership, we've got a private Facebook group, and it's lovely to hear the mums talk openly, and sometimes they're, upset that they've missed baby showers. And then they also talk about how they've been able to really bond with their baby in the first few weeks or few days because they're not having to worry about all their visitors. So there's definitely, as you said, the two prongs. There's been some positives come out of everything and some not so positives. So
it's good that they're talking about it though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much, Josie, for coming on today and discussing what is such an important issue. And if this episode has brought up anything for you, the Perinatal Anxiety and Depression Australia, or PANDA, as Josie did mention, is available to support you. And their phone number is 1300 726 306. So before we sign off, do remember that my team and I will be putting together the show notes for this episode at www.fitnessmama.com/podcast. So all the links and how to connect with Josie and Panda and her Facebook group, they will all be over on the show notes. So as I mentioned earlier, if you enjoyed this episode, I would love for you to share it, especially on your Instagram stories, and then tagging me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. I'd also love if you could take a second and subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Josie. It was just so lovely having you.
Thank you, and thank you for creating the space to talk about it. I hope it reaches people that need to hear it.
Thank you. So have a fabulous day, everyone, and I do look forward to you joining me next week for another amazing episode of the Fitness Mama podcast. Thanks for listening to the Fitness Mama podcast, brought to you by the Fitness Mama freebies found at www.fitnessmama.com/free. So please take a few seconds to leave a review, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and be sure to take a screenshot of this podcast, upload it to your social media, and tag me at Fitness Mama so I can give you a shout out too. Until next time, remember, an active pregnancy, confident childbirth, and strong postnatal recovery is something that you deserve. Remember our disclaimer, materials and contents in this podcast are intended as general information only and shouldn't substitute any medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. I'll see you soon.